Yo, 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 what it do, how it go? It's the internet's favorite fake uncle coming at you live and direct somewhere on the highway. First, before I even get into that, let me get into this real quick. Last night, dog, these Philadelphia 76ers, man, you know how long it took for us to get the 3 wins last year? The Sixers are right now one of, I think, 4 teams that are still undefeated? You dig what I'm saying? You know how long it took us to get 3 wins last year? It was Thanksgiving, dog. Thanksgiving, a full month and some change into the season before we got the 3 win. And they did it without Joe. For all of those, Joe is cook people. I hope y'all saw when he put up 20 points in 20 minutes the other night. Man, listen, I don't remember the last time that I watched a Philadelphia sports team with no expectations. You know what I mean? Specifically this Sixers team. I don't remember the last time I watched the Sixers with no expectations. You feel me? It had to be. It definitely hasn't been any season this decade. You feel me? And so I went into this season saying, you know what? All hope is not lost. So long as we still got, Maxey. You feel me? McCain showed promise. McCain was the rookie of the year front runner last year before he destroy his leg. So I said there is hope. Maybe this season will still be ass, but the following year, then we could begin to build on something. Dog, I don't know. The rebuild might not have even really been a rebuild. Maybe it's a retool. But again, I'm not going to get my whole. I'm just watching with no expectations for the future. I'm just enjoying the ride. Enjoying what I'm seeing right now. So there's my Sixers take right there, dog. Anyway, I digress. So I wanted to rap with y'all a little bit. Sunday, I was in Newark. Shout out to Terrific Tariq. I know that's his old stomping grounds. I was up in Newark, Brick City. That Newark is Brick City, right? Or is that Jersey City? I don't know. Regardless, point is North Jersey, up the southeast New York. You feel me? Is where I was at. I think I said this before. My wife's family is from that neck of the woods, right? From Newark, from East Orange. Any of y'all who know about North Jersey know that, and this is going to be the last tangent before I get into this. Any of y'all who know about North Jersey, the thing about Jersey, man, is that Jersey might be the most urbanized state in the country. Don't quote me on that. I'm just going based off of, my own personal observations. I mean, we still got, a hella backwoods, especially in South Jersey. But it might be, and I think that a lot of people don't really, because everybody just assumes that Jersey is just one big suburb, which is not. You dig what I'm saying? One big suburb and then the beach. The thing with Jersey, right, is that Jersey doesn't have any cities with 500,000 people, but we got 2 or 3 that have between 250 and 350, like Newark, Jersey City, and Elizabeth, I think. And then we got a bunch of other ones that 10 or 20 other cities that got anywhere between 75 and 200,000. You feel me? That's, your East Oranges, your West Orange, your Pattersons, Paramus, and I'm just staying up north right now. You go a little bit down south, you got Trenton, obviously. You got Camp. You even got Toms River out there by the ocean. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like Texas, right? Because Texas is like that, except Texas do got, big, 500,000 plus population people. But then, they got a bunch of smaller like Beaumont and Tyler and all of that kinds of stuff, right? That's kind of how Jersey is, right? The difference is that Jersey is uber small, you feel me? And so all of those cities, all of those, 75, 100,000, 150,000 population cities are all stacked on top of each other. That's how Newark and Newark and the Oranges, and really you could count Jersey City in there too. That's how that is up there. Is that the only exceptions really being Trenton and Camden and Toms River, like I said. And Camden really effectively it's just East Philly, to be honest, culturally at least. Yeah, I'd say if Jersey was Pennsylvania, right? If Jersey was Pennsylvania, East Orange, Newark, all of that would be one big city. It would be Philadelphia, right? It would be Philadelphia, but it would be, instead of, Patterson and Clifton and all of that, it would be, Olney, right? It would be, Kensington. It would be Tioga. It would be, west of East Oak Lane and all of that. You know what I mean? It will be north. You dig? So yeah, I say that. I don't even know why I went off on that tangent. To pad the video out probably, but anyway, I say that getting into this point, right? We had a family gathering up there, and like I said in the past, I have a bunch of different people in my extended circle who, some folk who pretty much anybody that I know has been impacted, has been affected by, these furloughs to some degree. You dig what I'm saying? I know people who are trying to get their student loans figured out, but they can't because, all of the goofiness that's going on with the Department of Ed, right? I got people, who depend on Medicaid and Medicare, you feel me? And on food stamps and all that kinds of stuff. Then I have federal workers in my family. I got an aunt who works for the IRS. I got an uncle, you feel me, retired Air Force vet. He works for the Pentagon, right? And, they have been impacted by it. You dig what I'm saying? It's income that's gone out of their pockets. You feel me? Now, they've been able to take advantage of unemployment or whatever, but unemployment ain't the same as having a job, dog. Especially, when you got responsibilities, when you got rent or a mortgage, you got kids, you got insurance payments, all that kind of stuff. Cause that's the main thing that people don't talk about. You dig what I'm saying? You know why people covet government jobs, city, state, or federal government? It's not the pay, it's the benefits. You dig what I'm saying? You can't beat government unless you like a teacher. That's about it. That's the only profession where I could think of that has better benefits than working for the government. And that's, again, especially when you got kids or when you're older or when you got issues going on or whatever, you got to find a way to compensate for that. You dig what I'm saying? And a lot of people, what they wind up doing, I had to do this for a period, you feel me, when I had took time off way back, in the day. I had took time off and I had to pay out of pocket to my employer to keep my insurance active. You dig what I'm saying? And this was a private employer. You dig? So it was not nearly as good as having state benefits. You know what I mean? So yeah, but that's kind of off of the main point that I wanted to get at. So there was somebody there, and they had made the point, and they said this, and this is why I wanted to share it with you. They said, well, it's two things I wanted to share with you. They said, well, with all of this going on, maybe folk will start going back to the way that it was back in the day. When you could go knock on somebody's door and get a cup of flour, get a cup of sugar. You dig what I'm saying? And somebody else said, it's crazy because, matter of fact, my mother-in-law said, it's crazy because nowadays folk don't even know their neighbors' names no more. And as we were riding through Newark, I was riding with my in-laws, and as we was riding through Newark, my mother-in-law, because again, that's her old neck of the woods. We were up there by like Clinton Place, I think. And she had made the point, because if you're from the Northeast, you know that anywhere you go, if you've ever lived in the Northeast or you've ever been to a residential area in the Northeast, I'm not talking about, you've been to Manhattan, Times Square. I'm talking about if you've ever been to a residential area in the Northeast, you know that in a big city, it's row homes. You feel me? We have row homes, townhomes. You dig what I'm saying? I lived my whole life, my entire childhood, from the age of, matter of fact, my first apartment was a townhome. But from the age of 0 to 24, I had spent my entire life in row homes. You dig what I'm saying? And she was talking about, how back in the day, if you bought a townhouse, a house that was connected, then, you was basically the Jeffersons. You was, at the top of the pops, right? Because back in the day, people, even when they owned their homes, a lot of folk, they lived in 2 and 3 family units. They lived in that was the way that they did it back. Matter of fact, I remember having a coworker talking about, buying a duplex. You feel me? And they living in one part and then having another family, you dig what I'm saying, in the other part, right? I remember I had moved into when I had moved into my apartment, and my wife moved in next to us. I had been accustomed to this again my whole life. Like people don't like the idea of living attached to somebody else because they get rats. Inevitably, you're going to get rats, right? If a squirrel is living, in their walls, eventually it's going to migrate over to you somehow. Whatever they doing over there, you can hear it. You can smell. If they cooking crack in the basement or something, that smell is going to seep through into the walls, and you can smell that, right? They smoking weed or they tobacco or whatever. You feel what I'm saying? You can hear every argument. Everybody business. That's why when we moved into our first apartment, there was this girl. She was a really nice girl, and she lived in the townhome above, because that's how it was structured. There was townhomes. So we was on the bottom half of it, and she was on the top, right? And she was a young girl. So, she would have guys over from time to time. And the way that the unit was built, her bedroom was right above ours. So y'all kind of already know where this is going, right? Is that every time she brought a guy over, we could hear everything that was going on, to the point that we used to play this game where we would try to determine how long she was going to stay with a guy based off of how loud she was. You know what I mean? And it was pretty accurate. You dig what I'm saying? But anyway, I digress. But the point that I wanted to get at, and then I'm gonna wrap this video up, right? If y'all have stuck around to this point, is that this gets to a point that I reiterate all the time on this channel and on Maine, right? Is that people, people they ask me this question about, oh, well, and this is kind of, if y'all seen, some of the back and forth I've had with some of the more head ass people, who lurk around the fringes of this channel, and I had gave my take about China or whatever. And I always hate this is one of the most head ass takes that I hear. And I just assume that people who have this interpretation, you feel me, y'all have heard me describe this before, white leftist TM, is middle class suburban kids who didn't figure out how the world worked, still really don't know how the world worked, but didn't really figure it out until, they got to college and, they experienced what it was like to not have for the first time. And then all of a sudden, they got pissy because, they couldn't make tuition that one semester. And so now, they look to China or they look to Korea or they look to whatever as, the benchmark. And they say, oh, well, what's the alternative then? China may not be perfect. Korea may not be perfect. But what other state do you know that's espousing? And I'm like, bitch, that's the problem. You understand what I'm saying? We need to stop looking to the state for solutions. You dig what I'm saying? Stop that. The solution is within us. The solution is community. You feel me? But so many of y'all have gotten so accustomed and so used to being quite literally dependent upon the state for sustenance that you can't fathom the idea of a truly stateless society. You dig what I'm saying? I'm not talking about, communism in political terms. I'm not talking about a communist state. I'm talking about, because again, I grew up in an environment where all of the, this communal policing, this restorative justice, this mutual aid, all of that was just growing up in the hood, dog. That was just, you dig what I'm saying? Because when you come from an environment where you are accustomed to having little or having little to nothing, you become conditioned to rely upon others and for others to rely upon you for the sake of sustaining yourself and sustaining the community. You understand what I'm saying? When you're accustomed to being neglected by the state, which again, historically, Black and Indigenous people have been neglected and exploited by the state. You dig what I'm saying? You learn to depend on one another. And the thing that always gets me is that you don't have to be best friends with a person to establish community with them. I'll tell y'all, I had a neighbor who, when I was learning how to drive, you know what I mean? I tapped they fender one day, and they decide, oh, well, to teach me a lesson, going to call the police. You feel me? I got points. It was my provisional. You understand what I'm saying? So that messed me up. You dig what I'm saying? But to teach me a lesson, they called the police, and from that day on, hey, Will, how's it going on? Fuck you, nigga. You dig what I'm saying? But that ain't stopped me from maintaining community with them. You understand what I'm saying? Because that's how you survive in that environment. I say that to make this point is that perhaps we are getting to a point in our history as people where, because honestly, and this is a take that I know a lot of y'all are not going to agree with, I don't think that most people, quite frankly, have gotten to the breaking point of saying, the hell with the state. The state ain't doing nothing for us anyway. You feel me? Let's go build something better with blackjack and hookers. Real ones got that reference, right? I don't think that enough people have reached that point yet. Is that because, again, they are reliant. You dig what I'm saying? I did that video a while ago talking about, the truth about the civil rights movement and how integral, you feel me, guns and gun ownership was to the civil rights movement, especially in the Deep South. You dig what I'm saying? And for the bougie, the urbane Negroes in the North and whatever and whatnot could not understand, could not comprehend why a civilized person, and this is where a lot of y'all are at now, why a civilized person would ever need a gun. You know what I mean? But when you a country nigga, you understand what I'm saying? When you a country nigga, that's just how we live. You understand what I'm saying? That's just the way of the world. That's just, the way of life down here. You understand what I'm saying? Because we are not conditioned to rely on the state. We look after and we take care of our own down here. You dig what I'm saying? So I get it. You dig what I'm saying? Even, again, I'm from Jersey, so we got our gun laws are tighter than a nun's coochie. You dig what I'm saying? So I ain't gonna lie to y'all and say I didn't grow up around guns. That's neither here nor there. I ain't gonna get too deep into that. But I did not grow up with gun culture the way that some of y'all in the South did. But I did grow up in an environment that conditioned us to be self-reliant. You know what I mean? That conditioned us to make the best of what we and each other had, because, food stamps is only gonna go but so far. You know what I mean? Welfare checks is only gonna go but so far. You know what I'm saying? And for people like me, who was in and out of that place, because, my mom wound up having, in between, rough periods, right? My mom would make just enough money where we didn't qualify for, so we fell into the gap of being too rich to qualify for most benefits, but also being too poor, you understand what I'm saying, to sustain ourselves, you dig? And so that's where the reliance upon community came in. So I say that to make this point, y'all, is that stop waiting for Superman, man. Let this, be the beginnings of us beginning to understand that the change that we seek, really the fundamental change that we need, especially as people of color, not just talking about black folks, but Latinos, you feel me, indigenous Americans, Asians, all of us, the fundamental change to the way that we do things that we need is not going to come by way of legislation. It's going to come by us building the better mousetrap. You understand what I'm saying? But I just wonder how many of us are willing and ready to do that. And how many of us are just satisfied with bitching about what Democrats and Republicans aren't doing to, folk who we already know are going to jerk us off for having the right opinion about the state of things. I wonder how many of us are just satisfied bitching about Trump for the umpteenth thousandth time than actually doing what's in our power, you feel me, to divorce ourselves from state dependency. So yeah, there y'all have it. That's y'all words of wisdom for the morning. Deuces.